We're in Ottawa today on a mission to deepen ties between our two countries. They met with the Prime Minister and the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, National Defence and Industry.
And we hope that this meeting will continue very positive discussions toward ensuring that some of the cracks that have appeared in the relationship in recent months are healed and we move forward together.
Those cracks in the Canada-U.S. relationship were something Prime Minister Carney spoke about with his cabinet at their retreat this week, a relationship that he says has changed forever.
We had, for almost half a century, we as Canada, a relationship with the Americans, which were a steady process of deepening integration. And that process of deepening integration is over. We are in a position now where we cooperate when necessary, but not necessarily cooperate.
The government may cooperate on U.S. President Donald Trump's Golden Dome, that multi-billion-dollar missile defense system.
In the campaign, I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing. And we'll be discussing Canada. They want to hook in and they want to see if they can be a part of it. That sort of makes sense. I guess that's what I was talking about from day one. You know, it just automatically makes sense, and it won't be very difficult to do, but they'll pay their fair share.
We'll see how the government is planning for all of this next week. The King will deliver the speech from the throne on Tuesday, laying out the government's priorities and kicking off a new session of Parliament. On topic, our party insiders are here. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor. Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. And Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. Hello to you all. You made it to Friday. It's been a mercifully quiet week, but so there's some interesting little nuggets of news. I want to start with these meetings here in Ottawa. Melanie, do you think these kinds of ministerial working groups between the ministers and the senators, how much do they matter when we know it's all going to be decided by one guy back in the Oval Office?
That's a good question. And a guy in the Oval Office that changes his mind every day. A lot. So yeah, I guess when you consider that, it's hard to take them at value that they matter. But I think they do matter. I think building relationships is important. There is, we talk a lot about state to province, but I think, elected official to elected official, that's also really good. Building relationships, showing, for folks who may not already have a relationship with people here in Canada, why it matters that relationship continues, how it impacts them with the breakdown in the relationship. So I do think the more allies we can have south of the border, the better. And I would say bipartisan allies as well, which is really important, so that we have allies with both the Republicans and the Democrats, because we know that Donald Trump is more likely to listen to, well, I don't know if he is actually going to listen to any of them, but more likely to listen to
for sure. And
more than others.
Minister Joly just made that point, that having somebody like Kevin Cramer from North Dakota, who's in with the president, right? He was standing right beside him during the the Golden Dome announcement was made. Is that sort of a nice little backdoor into the White House and this administration, Greg?
Absolutely. But I would also note one of the senators that was here is Amy Klobuchar, who...
Not a great backdoor to the White House.
No, but reminds us that we have had a long history with the United States. And although I believe the Prime Minister is correct, that what the President is doing is untying things that are going to be very, very difficult to tie again. But, I look at this. My mother's father was from Boston. His family came to Nova Scotia, and they decided to stay there. We always had an affinity, what we call in the East Coast the Boston States. A lot of, prior to Alberta, a lot of people found jobs in, the auto industry, could be on both sides of the border, or in New England. I looked at some of Klobuchar's tweets today. She was here when Biden was here 2 years ago.
Right.
But this is a woman who, kicked off her presidency in a blizzard. So I think she understands Canada in a way that perhaps some other politicians wouldn't. But, she knew about the Professional Women's Hockey League. So, and senators are around. They have 6-year terms. Trump has let's hope, just a 4-year term. So I do think we're seeing those senators. Jean Shaheen was, again, I'm trying to remember, Vermont or New Hampshire.
Vermont.
Those people are looking at the long distance, marathon of this and trying that, once Donald Trump is gone, what can we do to get things together? It's sad, though, that we're looking that far down the road.
Fred, what's your take on all of this?
I think anytime you can have this cross-border conversation with people who do have the ear of the president, it's true. He may wake up and come up with a completely new idea or plan. The Golden Dome is something I never thought we would hear about this week or any week. But having people that can communicate to him and talk to him about the issues and the whole process and where we're going. I do find it odd, though, that Prime Minister Carney went and said, like, we're never going to be as tied to these guys as we are, but we may join this massive Golden Dome security shield. It's such a contradictory comment, and I just don't understand it. I'm not opposed necessarily to the Golden Dome because I don't quite understand it. I don't have enough information to say myself my opinion on, but it's just there's this weird thing happening with Carney where he's the man with the plan, but we don't have a budget, don't have actual mandate letters to cabinet ministers. There's just this.
There's a lot of connectivity on defense already. NORAD would be one.
Sure,
NATO. Let's hope NATO
the whole Star Wars
intact.
program that Ronald Reagan pushed was totally kiboshed, and we said no to it. So
absolutely.
It's weird to say we're not going to be. The relationship has changed. We're not going to be as close. But, by the way, we're going to completely fundamentally
I think that the tell there is what Trump reads, which was the policy, and then he looks up and he just starts riffing, and you just, let's be honest, I'm not going to speak for you three, but you start to smile because you just think that sounds ridiculous. So there obviously is some sort of policy behind it, and there have been conversations. But it's the other things that Trump starts saying where you just kind of go, I don't know if I actually believe that.
Do you believe it? And should we as voters, citizens, whatever you want to call it, buy this? Because I don't know what's true and what's not either.
I kind of, when you say I didn't totally know what it was, I think I made a joke to the guys when we were waiting outside that I don't know if you folks have watched Paradise anytime recently, it was a great show. But I was like, Golden Dome. I'm like, is that what they did in Paradise? But anyways, so the communicating it to what exactly that is to people in a time where folks are really worried about what their mortgage looks like, how they're going to keep putting food in the bills. I don't totally know how we do that. As relates to Carney's comments, I agree. I think saying we're never going to be tied as much as we were, but we're open to this. I do think.
But it's not even that, right? He's saying the further deepening, we could be just as tied 10 years from now as we are today. It's that it's not going to get any deeper. I think the example that I keep coming back to is China after the first Trump tariffs in his first term. China exports to the United States are basically flat since 2017 or 18. But China's growth everywhere else in the world is up 83%. And I think that's the kind of model we're talking about. Is that, am I being outlandish here?
Type of model in what?
In terms of the less deepening ties with the United States, more growth, like whatever new growth we're going to have. We're going to sell them just as much oil, just as much potash, just as much steel as we do today. But any new capacity we add on, we can sell to everybody else.
Right.
Is that about right?
Right. And that's what, Tim Hodgins, the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy, was a very, very strong message that when you're listening to him talk, you don't know what party he's from, which is a good thing. It's about, getting our resources to markets. And it is a great thing to see, and it's a very positive development. It's a big shift over the last 10 years where things were really tied down and production was not happening. So if it's real, but that's where I wonder, like when they say one thing and then they do another. So it's like,
I don't know if we, are we talking defense or are we talking trade? They're very different.
But on both.
But, in terms of defense, there is some things that we can't change in terms of our geography and our shared border and the fact that the Arctic is an increasing concern, where at the same time the Prime Minister can say, we're looking for new trade partners. And some of those, our geography will affect that, obviously transport costs. But if we're looking for new partners, that's a bit different than saying, well, we're actually physically connected to the United States, and we have these long traditions around, defense that are a bit tougher to untie. But I think, if people are smart, they're probably prepared for untying of everything under this president.
But I mean, Melanie, if we're actually worried about Canadian sovereignty, is there much sense in adding at least an American-led military installation along the northern coast in Canada's Arctic?
Well, that was actually the one point that I was thinking when Greg was talking about. I think a lot of folks, rightly so, myself included, every time the president says, 51st state, every time he says, well, we're going to assert economic power until they do what we want to do. When he starts talking, and of course he's kind of stopped that for now, but when he talks that way, I don't know many Canadians who want us to tie into even closer, right? They kind of want to start thinking, well, what happens if he does go through on these, vague threats, jokes, whatever they are? If he moves on any of that, then what? How are we left standing? So I do think that there is maybe a disconnect there with how folks are feeling right